And the Midlands is one of the centres for the industry, based around Warwickshire.
There's been an explosion in video game production here in the Midlands, much of it centred around Leamington Spa. 1,000 people employed in the industry in Leamington Spa, earning the UK economy something like £100 million a year.
They say that if you go up any high street in the country and ask people what they do for a living, there's one place where the answer is most likely to be games developer: Royal Leamington Spa. We put that to the test.
I work for the police.
Semi-retired. I used to work for HSBC Bank in Leamington.
I'm a bartender.
Principal lecturer.
Most recently, I'm a web developer.
Web developer's close enough, right? Don't worry. We sat down with people who actually do work in the industry to tell us all about it. And when we asked them all where this whole Silicon Spa phenomenon began, they all came back with the same answer.
The reason that Leamington is such a hub for games companies is Codemasters.
Despite being told by his teacher, Mrs. Evans, to stop programming games, it's a waste of time, a young lad called David Darling would stay behind at school to code on the classroom's only keyboard. Him and his brother Richard were naturals, and by 1986 they had founded Codemasters, moving to Southam, just east of Leamington, to make their games.
Being a fan of the games industry before I even got in, I used to play the Codemasters games, the Dizzy games from the Oliver Twins. So I understood moving up here that this is where it all started.
I remember buying Codemasters games when I was a kid on my kind of Spectrum and Dragon 32 and stuff like that. So, and interesting, seeing in the back, the kind of, this game is awesome, David Darling. And then, that was the way that games marketing was done back in the very, very, very early days.
I did kind of like Dizzy when I was a kid, and then all the kind of classic kind of Codemasters games. I loved the BMX game that they did.
The first game we launched was BMX Simulator that my brother Richard wrote.
This is Codemasters' first ever game, BMX Simulator, written by Richard Darling and released in '86. This was the beginning of something big. 5 years and 12 Dizzy games later, Codemasters would find itself leading the UK market share.
In the early days of Codemasters, pretty much everything we did went to number one, and then as the market, the kind of business got bigger, it got more challenging, more difficult.
They raised the bar with what a small company can grow to and the global reach. So you've got to have a lot of admiration for the way they went about stuff and the way they built, Codemasters up.
David and Richard were quite different. Richard was very considered, thoughtful, very clever. David was much more passionate and just crazy ideas coming out left and right, some of which would be amazing, some of which would be not so amazing.
Well, evidently, enough of David's ideas leant towards the amazing side of things. Codemasters went on to publish a huge amount of recognisable franchises, including racing sim Colin McRae and chaotic fantasy Overlord. But Codemasters didn't only spawn games, they spawned companies.
We were working with lots of different programmers, and a lot of them ended up moving to the area. And as Codemasters grew over the years, then a lot of those people then would leave and they'd set up their own companies.
Like every so often people leave Codemasters, they form a studio or they write their own indie games.
It started with Codies, but then you always get, where you've got one successful company, you always get like satellite companies branching off it.
It's the root of the games industry in Leamington, really. I mean, that's where Blitz came from, it's where Playground came from.
We have Sega here, Microsoft investing heavily, and Ubisoft, and many, many others. I think we have, what is it now, up to about 50 companies in the digital sector, employing 2,500 people and generating £188 million worth of gross added value into the economy, which is extraordinary.
All credit to him and Richard for building an amazing company like Codemasters and leaving this fantastic legacy.
But if David Darling really is the king of Silicon Spa, then these two scamps are surely the jesters.
We've gotten two computer experts, whiz-kid computer people, Andrew and Philip Oliver. Now, as you can tell, they're twins. You're...
Andrew Oliver.
I'm Philip.
Hi, I'm Philip Oliver. And I'm Andrew Oliver. And together we're known as the Oliver Twins. We've done that before, by the way.
Creators of the best-selling Dizzy franchise and holders of the Guinness World Record for most prolific 8-bit developers, the Oliver Twins' first big break was in 1983 when they entered a video game competition held on the Saturday Show.
Right, well now it's
it's time to find out who's won our computer competition. Can we have a nice welcome, please, for our computer competition winners, Philip and Andrew Oliver from Trowbridge in Wiltshire. Where are they?
It's kind of funny and awkward and embarrassing to actually do it, but then going into school on Monday when everyone went, oh my God, we all saw you on TV, it was amazing. We
didn't tell anybody beforehand.
No,
because we were too nervous about that.
Well, I wrote it on paper and my brother typed it in. We tested it, found hundreds of mistakes, and after sort of a week of work, we managed to iron most of them out.
We were sort of the geeks. It was the real label that they used, but we didn't mind. We came to the end of the sixth form, parents wanted us to go to university, we weren't so sure. We wanted to write computer games, and we met up with the Darling brothers, who were just setting up a company called Codemasters.
Yeah, we've known the Olivers since about 1986. When we started Codemasters, we were looking for more games to launch.
The Oliver twins presented David with Super Robin Hood, a rip-roaring medieval platformer for the Amstrad, complete with state-of-the-art voice acting.
Welcome, Robin. Good luck. We presented it to the Darling brothers and asked them how much they'd pay for a game like this, to which David Darling said £10,000. Wow. Turns out it was royalties, but actually we got there in the end with royalties because the game became a massive success, and that was the start of our relationship with Codemasters and an enormous number of games for them. So I guess one of the games we're really famous for creating is Dizzy, the ultimate cartoon adventure. That's the big box version. They were quite often like that.
So when we were teenagers, we just loved cartoons, and when we started becoming sort of successful authors making video games, we just thought we wanted to create our own cartoon characters, and that's actually where Dizzy came from.
Here's one that we designed.
Here's one we made earlier.
Here's one we made earlier. It's just like Blue Peter. So a Fantasy World Dizzy
in '89.
You drew all the little screens and we worked out all the story and the puzzle and the characters.
People loved it and the games were hugely successful, and we went on to create about a dozen games.
But the Oliver twins didn't just draw faces on eggs. In 1990 they built up Blitz Games, which was followed up by Radiant Worlds in 2013. It changed hands again in 2017 when it was acquired by one of Europe's leading game developers, Rebellion.
We are helping to run Rebellion Warwick. I thought you were going to pick up on that. Let's try that again.
So Rebellion are famous for franchises like the Sniper Elite series, Zombie Army,
Battlezone.
Andrew and Philip are kind of industry stalwarts, legends, fixtures.
They have boundless enthusiasm for everything to do with games, really.
They kind of act as ambassadors for the Leamington games industry. I think they're very keen to see people do well here and the region do well. So yeah, and then they're both great guys.
Two of the most enthusiastic and creative people I know, which is usually great and sometimes a little bit tiring.
Just, the background brickwork is a bit gaudy, but what we wanted to do is, I'm just about to turn it off because actually it's getting quite annoying.
Leaving Codemasters in the mid to late 2000s was by no means the end for David. In 2011 he founded Quali, devoted to mobile games which don't require any pesky packaging.
There's a lot of advantages in being able to carry games around in your pocket and have mobile connections so you can play them with other people and using GPS, and there's lots of pros for smartphones. That's why we concentrate on it.
Quali is just one of many indie developers operating within Leamington whose roots can be traced back to Codemasters. Founded in 2017 with funding and support from the Oliver twins, Unit 2 Games intends to foster new talent through gameplay itself. Crater, made on Unreal Engine 4, is a game creation and publishing platform designed to open up the world of games development to those who never thought it possible.
Quite often when people think about games creation, they think about a solitary programmer in their bedroom, which often is the case with indie devs, but it doesn't need to be. It can be more of a social, playful thing. Like when you're a kid, you play make-believe with your friends. You can do that as a game creation thing.
But game development doesn't have to be a social, playful thing. There's also a lot of solitary programming in bedrooms. Viewpoint Games are a local indie company boldly traversing the unknown waters of VR, with their own title, VR Carts, and their cooperation on Ubisoft's Hungry Shark.
big companies are very cautious, whereas small companies can take risks. So that was the kind of driving force, really. Staying in the local area gave us a lot of opportunity to kind of work with people we knew.
Then again, not having a big team behind you can make indie development pretty difficult too.
The worst thing about being an indie is having to optimise everything yourself as you go along, especially in VR when you need to run at 90 frames a second. So you kind of suddenly you're going, oh no, we need to get the batch count down and the try count down, and that's by far the biggest kind of headache, optimising stuff to run the way you want it to run.
Of course, Leamington isn't all about small indie devs or splinters from Codemasters. As the industry has grown here, it's naturally attracted a wealth of AAA developers. Sega Hardlight keeps Sonic alive, Ubisoft Leamington, formerly Freestyle Games, have DJ Hero and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare under their belt, and Playground Games are fabled for the hugely popular Forza. But these aren't the only big franchises connected with Leamington. If you have any friends who've a lot of money, time and paint on their hands, you've surely heard of Warhammer.
We've recently launched a new game called Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realm War on mobile, so that's been super exciting, and that's keeping us really busy right now, making new content from that game and listening to player feedback and trying to make that game better.
Looking out the window of the beautiful Pixel Toys offices down at Regent Square's baked potato stand, I couldn't help but feel it all looks strangely familiar.
One of the games that Blitz did was Triage Simulator for first responders to accidents and stuff, and that was based on the parade.
Yeah, we had the Regent Square house, which is next to the potato stand and flower stand. For anybody that knows Leamington, parade
it's the
crosses
parade with the Regent
Street. So yeah, we modelled all of that and had a trauma trainer.
Although it did show that there was a big accident on that junction.
Yeah, not so good maybe.
My friend Dave Futrell was the guy who was dying in it. Just watch him slowly getting more and more sick.
I think it was a bomb.
Yeah, it was a bomb in the bin.
There's a bomb in the bin. They're all still there, aren't they? Potato and flower stand.
Yeah, they're still all there. They'll be there forever.
This all begs the question, does our lovely town crop up elsewhere in the virtual world?
Our new game, Realm War, actually has a number of AR features in it, and we actually done a couple of promotional videos around Leamington with game characters situated in Leamington. And actually the game before that, Freeblade, had some AR features as well, and we also used the street outside and things like that for some promotional materials.
I think it's the latest version of Forza Horizon. They've got the Chesterton windmill in that.
We did think about doing a kind of either a little race around Jefferson Gardens or like a little race around Warwick Castle in carts, but never got around to kind of doing that kind of polished stuff.
So everyone agrees that Leamington is undeniably picturesque. Judging by the websites of many of the games developers situated here, the town itself is its own selling point.
A lot of people who come here, a lot of the designers, the engineers, the creators and the entrepreneurs, maybe move here from London, and a lot of people find when they come to this area, they're so surprised by it, they love it.
Leamington is a really, really nice place to live, so personally I wouldn't want to live in the centre of London and make games. I would much rather do it in somewhere that's a little less stressful like Leamington Spa.
There's something about the area, the geography, it's so central, so close to London, really an hour and 10, 20 on the train. But it's beautifully set in the countryside, but it has a great feel to it as well, and I think that's very attractive.
I remember back, you would see half of Codemasters in the same pub on a Thursday night, right? So there was this great social experience in the town and all that sort of thing.
It's a nice place to live, and also now, because there's so many different companies in the games industries, there's quite a big gaming community. And I just love making games, and so it's just a good place to be, really.
I love Leamington. I moved here, maybe 8 or 9 years ago because I started working in the games industry. And yeah, I don't think I'll ever leave.
Fancy that! Leamington has some good user reviews. And what's more, it sounds as if the vast swathes of companies are far from any PvP situation. they're certainly playing co-op mode.
It's not really that competitive. Our competition is kind of the rest of the world, really. I mean, we're a close-knit community. We all know each other. We're all good friends. We've all worked with each other at various points.
I know people at all of these different companies, right, that have kind of sprung out of Codemasters, which is really nice from a social point of view, and actually we kind of will help each other in certain areas and stuff like that, you know, which is pretty cool. But it does make recruitment quite difficult. You know, there's a lot of them companies are trying to grow, including us, and you know, it then gets very competitive for hiring programmers, for instance. So there's always a demand for programmers, but trying to drag enough programmers to the Leamington area to fill all positions for all the companies here is pretty tough.
It's a healthy hub. There's obviously well-established companies that have been going strong, but I think with every generation there's the chance for new companies to emerge, and I think having a central hub kind of, it gives you that ability. So actually I can see it getting stronger and stronger in the future.
So considering that pretty much every game ever made apparently has some connection with Leamington, and all the developers know each other really well, how can people's jaws still drop when they find out that Forza's made round the corner?
There is such a rich and vibrant community here, but it's all quite under wraps.
Sort of people go, oh yeah, there are some video game companies around Leamington, but then I don't know,
Codemasters. It's like,
yeah,
okay, and there are others.
Yeah. But people just don't know things like Forza is written in Leamington, and that just seems a bit weird because it's quite big.
If you work in the industry, then when you walk up the parade, the main street, then you just see games people walking all over the place, like with Atari t-shirts or whatever. It's quite easy to recognise games people if you're from the industry. I'm not sure if the general public recognises everybody so much.
Regardless of whether Leamington's legacy is known by the general public, it certainly found recognition in the political world. The all-party parliamentary group for video games was co-founded by former MP for Warwick and Leamington James Plaskett, and his successor, Chris White, later became chair. And to top it all off, in 2012 our very own David Darling met with then Business Secretary Vince Cable to discuss the town's industry growth. Anyway, enough about politics, let's ask some miscellaneous questions.
Oh wow, that's a long list.
There are so many!
Ooh. That is a very tricky one.
Well, this one was very good.
I think the best game is probably DJ2.
I'm a massive rhythm action fan, and the DJ Hero games were great, and it's really sad that Freestyle is now Ubisoft.
Well, I think my favourite game is Micro Machines.
Micro Machines was a classic back in the late 80s, early 90s.
You'd always get groups of people playing it in the evenings and just having parties and drinking beer, and I don't know, there was something about it that just made it a real cult kind of game.
Micro Machines is something I played at university with my friends a lot, so, and then to actually end up working there, all my friends were just in awe, so it was really cool.
Depends who you ask.
I flipping well hope not, because
I don't think we should start it like that.
Okay.
Does it require something that you jack into your head for it to get to that point where you don't need a visor or whatever? Or is it just going to be that the graphics have increased at a certain level and, you know, the technology is so good that it can sense exactly where you are, so it just gives you a lot more gameplay options? You know, so it literally could be 5 years, it could be 2 years, it could be 20 years.
It'll become faster and lighter and clearer and higher res and longer batteries and all this kind of stuff, which will make the whole experience much better but much more mass market as well.
I have got some reservations with, whenever I play racing games I get really nauseous.
It's a very cool gimmick, and I think that there are aspects to it that's really cool, but I think AR might be where it's at.
It has a bright future, but it's not for everyone. Consoles will still live. Games on mobile phones will still live. It's just giving yet another platform, and there'll be a percentage of the market who absolutely love it. When the new console comes out, it's like, wow, they've just sold X million Nintendo Switches. Bloody hell, PlayStation must be worried. No, really, PlayStation is selling shitloads. Xbox is selling shitloads. Yeah. It's just like more people are buying it. But hang on, aren't they doing mobile phones? You've got Switch and a mobile phone, haven't they? They've got the Xbox. It's like, what, they've got multiple consoles?
What's that?
That was really random. I didn't really understand the question.
It's that that's not language or anything, or is that like, is that a C++ thing or something?
I would go tabs.
I would do spaces personally, just because it's easier to hit in the keyboard.
I haven't coded for 25 years.
Well, fair enough.
I don't know.
Well, tabs are better, so.
Tabs are better. Tell your team. Yeah.
So the tab, so it's nested. Oh, it'd be easier to read if it's nested that way. Right, I get you. Okay, yeah. For nesting code, then I suppose tabs. Yeah.
Can't run a company in the games industry without being brothers. That's just one of the laws. That's what I'm going to say. Many of the games companies in the UK are actually set up by brothers. I guess it comes from the 80s, where the computers were very expensive. They were very time consuming to sort of learn how to program on. So you could sort of pool resources, both the money to buy the equipment and then the time to actually go through and learn it. You can either be competitive, and at times brothers definitely are, but you can also be very cooperative. So it would take me half the time to write the game if I can use sort of Andrew's time as well.
Unfortunately, our own time is nearly up. Armed with the history of the Darling Brothers' success, with all the subsequent companies that spawned from it, and also considering Leamington's location, scenery and creative flair, we can begin to understand how Silicon Spa came about. But as astounding as the journey is, our role isn't to dote on the past, but to anticipate the future. As Carl said, every generation brings new talent and new possibilities. We've only to hope that our youngsters aren't to be put off by the Mrs. Evanses of the world.
Yeah, I mean, when we set up, I mean, people said we were crazy and that games were just a fad and it would pass and, like, get a real job. That's what we were told when we started writing video games, that you couldn't make a career. Everyone now accepts that a career in video games is really cool.
You don't make games on paper, you make games by developing them and playing them and putting them in front of people and seeing how people adapt and pick up that experience. And if it doesn't work with you, it's probably not going to work with someone else.
But these days, it's actually a case of plugging together lots of other people's kind of hard work and all the skills and knowledges of lots of people. So a modern game is just plugging together enormous number of components of other people's work and then making sure that you put your gameplay into it and your graphics into it. So it's changed a lot. I'm not sure how succinct that was. I think that was a little bit long.
That's fine, because the cutting is a thing.
Well, you might not be able to cut that. It might be on the cutting floor. And I had to do a talk for Microsoft on the Kinect. There's technology. And there was Philip. That died. Kinect. What's the future of Kinect? It's dead.